It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the EPPP Ad Hoc Committee meeting of the California Board of Psychology. I'm calling the meeting to order and ask that Ms. Brito to please call the roll to establish quorum.
Good morning. Kasuga.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Barb Sheets.
Aye.
Roll is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brito. We're gonna start with agenda item number 2. The EPPP Ad hoc committee was established to look at the national exam for licensure as it relates to the mission of the California Board of Psychology, which is to protect consumers of psychological services by licensing psychologists, regulating the practice of psychology, and supporting the evolution of the profession. I welcome all our stakeholders in attendance, including our licensees who are looking to gain CPD credits for today's meeting. With that, I would like to ask Ms. Cochran or one of our board staff to go over the instructions for how to get CPD credits.
Hi, yes, thank you, Dr. Kasuga. My name is Lizelle, and I'm the Continuing Professional Development and Renewals Coordinator for the board. So attending today's committee meeting provides you with CPD credit. For your CPD records, please notate today's date as April 28th, 2023, and note that we are here for the ad hoc committee meeting. At the end of the meeting, I will announce how many hours you will be credited. If you called into the meeting, please email BOPCE, that's BOPCE, at dca.ca.gov with your license number and the phone number used to call in. If you signed into the meeting, use your computer or mobile device, your attendance is automatically documented and no further information is necessary. Thank you for your participation, and back to you, Dr. Kasuga.
Thank you, Ms. Cochran. Ms. McCochran. Today's meeting is set to go from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. or until completion of business. There will be scheduled breaks every hour or so with a scheduled lunch break, which will depend on the meeting's progress, but will be around noontime. Hopefully that works for most of you, if not for all. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3, which is public comments for items not on the agenda. Please note that the committee may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. This is in accordance to Government Code Sections 11125 and 11125.7, subsection A. I also want to take this time to remind individuals who would like to make a public comment not to discuss specifics, including names as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. Such decisions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to the members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Such discussions, therefore, may create a conflict and interfere with the board's capacity to make necessary determinations. Board staff is available to speak to you individually and answer your questions for your specific matter outside of the hearing of board members. Although this may give the impression we are not being responsive, these procedures are critical to ensure the compliance with the Open Meetings Act and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. With that said, the committee is eager to listen attentively to your comments. Mr. Moderator, kindly provide us the instructions on how to make a public comment, please.
We are now accepting public comment for items not on the agenda. if you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And our first hand up is Cynthia Webster. Hold on, Cynthia. We're going to send a request to unmute your mic. All right, Cynthia, we're going to send you a second request to unmute your microphone. You should find an unmute me button in the lower center of your screen. All right, try this, Cynthia. Are you able to unmute now? Should be able to unmute at will. Lower center of your screen on a mobile device. All right, we're going to move along. Please raise your hand or type comment if you would like to try again. Scott Smith, we see that you have a hand up, but you do not have a microphone connected. Bear with us just a moment. Get you instructions. On the screen. All right, we're going to wait just a few more seconds. See that Roxanne has raised a hand. Bear with us, Roxanne. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, great. Is this where I can comment on what I'd like the committee to consider for the adoption of this second test?
Is that on the agenda? This is for items not on the agenda. Agenda item number 3.
Okay.
There is an that's in the agenda, a later agenda, probably on agenda item number 6.
Okay. And I can wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, there are no other requests for public comment at the moment. Shall we return to the agenda?
I just wanted to know what happened to the earlier 2. I just wanted to make sure that they have an opportunity to relay their technical difficulties if they still wanted to make a public comment.
They have lowered their hands and they have not typed anything into the question and answer box. However, we have a new question from Kenneth Sider. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Good. I don't know if this is appropriate at this point in time, but a couple of concerns. One concern is the test is labeled skills, and I assume it's a paper and pencil test, and skills usually are evaluated by overseeing or supervision. There's lots of nuances in translating theory into skill. So this is probably an exam of the theory of practice, or the theory of technique, or the theory of interacting as opposed to an actual skills evaluation. Early, and I know that they've done away with it, there used to be an oral exam. I'm sure there were some problems with it, but that seemed to be much more of an evaluation of skills than a paper and pencil test. So I don't know if that goes here or somewhere else. And I'm new to the committee and new to this, but that was the first thing that sort of struck me. At least the name seems misleading.
We do have an agenda item that might best fit for that, because I think that is a comment with regards to the test, the exam. So I think that would also fit on agenda item number 6.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Moderator, do we have any more public comments?
Looks like yes from Aaron 10. Hold on just a moment. All right, Aaron, we're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Hi,
Go ahead,
just
please.
a quick question. Do I have to stay the whole time for the credit or can I do partial credits?
Hi, this is Lizelle. Yeah, you can stay however long you want. And then for the credit, you would just receive credit for the amount of hours that you stayed or the amount of time that you stayed.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, and at the moment, there are no other requests for comment. Shall we return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Moving on, we are moving on to agenda item number 4, which is the discussion and approval of the October 22, 2021 committee, EPPP ad hoc committee meeting minutes. So with that, I welcome my fellow committee members.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the October 22nd, 2021 ad hoc committee meeting minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. It was moved by Dr. Harp Sheets, and we got a second from Mr. Fu. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Is there any public comment on the committee meeting minutes?
We are now accepting public comment on the meeting minutes. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment.
For those who want to follow along, this starts on page 18 of the combined packet. And this item is, so that's where you can find it.
And with that, there are no requests for comment on the meeting minutes. Shall we return to the motion?
Yes, please.
Madam Chair, would you like to call the roll?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Kasuga,
Aye.
Harp Sheets,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 5, and this is the overview of the history of the EPPP Part 2 Skills Exam. I welcome Ms. Snyder to take us through this agenda item.
Good morning. Name is Lavinia Snyder. I'm the examination coordinator for the Board of Psychology. I'll be going over agenda item number 5. Back in 2017, Dr. Stephen Phillips, then president of the Board of Psychology, determined that there was a need for a stakeholder input regarding possible implementation of the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, ASPPB, Examination for Professional Practice in Psychology Part 2. A task force with representatives from various stakeholders was created to provide input to the board regarding consideration and possible implementation of the EPPP Part 2. The task force's role was to consider the pros and cons of the proposed examination to the board's prospective licensees and consumers, eligibility criteria, the application process, and the impact on the board's process for licensure. The task force met on April 5th and June 29th of 2018 at the Department of Consumer Affairs headquarters in Sacramento. This task force was chaired by board member Dr. Cheryl Kasuga. So the examination for professional practice, currently known as the EPPP, Part 1, is a computer-based examination developed and administered by ASPPB. The exam is one of 2 examinations required for a licensure in California. The cost of the exam to the applicant is $600. The EPPP Part 2 skills exam per ASPPB will provide an independent, standardized, reliable, and valid assessment of the skills necessary for independent practice and enhanced consumer protection. The cost of this exam was initially set at $600. ASPPB, at the time of the initial task force meeting, announced the plan to make this exam mandatory for all jurisdictions. After several discussions, the task force did not believe the EPPP Part 2 was in the best interest of California consumers for the following reasons: lack of proven necessity for the examination, concerns related to the exam's ability to assess skills resulting in negligible consumer protection, costs and burden on prospective licensees, especially on historically underrepresented and socioeconomically disadvantaged students, new barriers to licensure, and potentially detrimental impact on access to psychological services to California consumers, and clarification on whether the optional enhanced EPPP is an indefinite alternative or ASPPB is simply postponing the deadline for mandatory adoption. If the implementation date is merely being delayed, the board would wanted clarification on the anticipated date for mandatory implementation. The task force also had significant concerns with the loss of license portability with other states if ASPPB decided to mandate the EPPP 2. Due to this concern, the task force recommended, should Part 2 become mandatory, that the board continue participation in the EPPP and create its own version of the and not create its own version of the national exam. To that end, the task force recommended implementation of what was presented as option 3. In your packet, you should have a flow chart of how the business process would look like if the EPPP 2 became operational. So in August 2018, ASPPB retracted its decision and made the EPPP Part 2 an optional exam for all state boards and proposed incentives for early adopters. Although ASPPB's announcement clarified that the EPPP Part 2 was now an optional component, it did raise concerns regarding whether ASPPB would eventually make the examination mandatory. In a letter dated October 24, 2018, ASPPB detailed enhancements regarding the implementation of the EPPP moving forward. Those enhancements were also included in that memo. There are, I believe, 13 enhancements, and one of them was the decision ASPPB rescinded its original decision back in 2017, which made the enhanced EPPP a single licensure exam, and EPPP 2 became a 2-option exam. And then the task force recommendations and update from ASPPB were presented at the November 2018 board meeting. Although the board welcomed the enhancements made by ASPPB, excuse me, just one second. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so although the board welcomed the enhancements made by ASPPB, the board continued to have concerns which were addressed in the letter dated December 2018, and that they were concerned about the uncertainty as to the implementation results and in a current inability to move forward with the required statutory and regulatory changes. That ASPPB would aid the board in identifying all statutory and regulatory changes needed to implement the new examination. ASPPB would continue to evaluate the total cost of the board exams and establish a uniform lower total cost to all jurisdictions, and as well as the board had requested ASPPB make the data testing available to the board so we can audit the EPPP. ASPPB's response was noted in a letter, attachment B, dated January 29, 2019. Summarily, the board of directors had determined, ASPPB board of directors had determined that the jurisdictional use of the enhanced EPPP would not be mandated during the initial implementation process. The board of directors, however, would revisit the implementation process of the examination and determine whether or not to continue delivering the EPPP as a standalone option or deliver the enhanced EPPP. They would take into consideration the time it takes for California to develop and implement regulation changes and factor that into their decision. ASPPB also reduced the exam fee for the EPPP from $600 to $450. The board also requested beta testing information from participating jurisdictions to enable the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Professional Examination Service to conduct an audit of the EPPP. That audit was completed and an EO summary provided in April 2021 that was also included in your packet as attachment C. It concluded, overall, the SME concluded that the content of the EPPP Part 1 assesses a general knowledge required for entry-level psychologist practice in California, with the exception of California laws and ethics. This general knowledge should continue to be tested on the California Psychology Laws and Ethics examination. The SMEs were impressed by the EPPP Part 2, but both by the concept of measuring skills and by the design of the scenario-based items. Additionally, the SMEs favored the EPPP Part 2 over the EPPP Part 1 as a single examination option. However, the SMEs concluded that while the EPPP Part 2 assesses a deeper measure of skills than those measured by EPPP Part 1, that alone may not support adoption of the EPPP Part 2. The SMEs further concluded that the skills measured by the EPPP Part 2 may be adequately assessed during supervised clinical experience, and that the EPPP 2 could possibly be an unnecessary barrier to licensure. OPS recommended that the board continue to monitor the beta testing results of the EPPP Part 2 as part of their decision-making process for adopting the EPPP Part 2 as a requirement for licensure in California in the future. This audit was presented to the EPPP Ad Hoc Committee meeting held on October 21st, 2021. However, further discussion could not be made until ASPPB Board of Directors decided on the plan for the EPPP2. In October 2022, ASPPB Board of Directors announced the implementation of the enhanced EPPP two-part exam to become effective January 1st, 2026 to all member jurisdictions. The announcement and factual overview is also attached in your with your packet. ASPPB is committed to addressing concerns regarding the exam. They do not believe the EPPP2 will create a barrier to practice and promises to smooth the road to licensure amidst a national mental health crisis. ASPPB's core value is to develop a fair, equitable, and accessible exam, and that the two-part exam ensures a thorough assessment of competence and promote consumer protection. They will be mindful of the cost and confirm a 25% reduction of the fee with no current plans to increase the fee. After the announcement, the board received several letters of opposition and one in favor of implementing the EPPP2. Copies are attached for your review. They are attachments E and F. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Now I welcome the committee members for any comments or questions.
Madam Chair, Mr. Fu has his hand up.
Go ahead, Mr. Fu.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga. I'm wondering, would you like to wait until item number 6 for any questions that you might have with regard to any follow-up items from OPES? Or would you like to have those questions asked during the history part here?
It's just mostly if you have any questions with regards Ms. Snyder's presentation of the history, anything that you need to clarify. And thank you for reminding me that this agenda item is for informational purposes only. And we certainly have fuller discussion of the exam in a later agenda item.
Perfect. I have no questions then. Thank you so much for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions with regards to the history and overview that Ms. Snyder presented? I will go ahead and open it to public comment. Comments.
We are now accepting public comments for agenda item 5. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And we're going to wait about 15 seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. And our first request for comment comes from Arceli Lopez Arenas. Hold on just a moment, please. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Araceli Lopez Arenas, and I am concerned about the history of the EPPP Part 2, particularly with the statement that they do not believe that the EPPP2 will create a barrier to practice and promises to smooth the road to licensure amid some national mental health crisis. I think that the EPPP1 is contributing, that it is a barrier, it is causing adverse impact, not only for BIPOCs as the research has submitted, but also EPPP2 does not really increase the incremental validity of the exam. And I would be interested in correlational studies of the EPPP1 with disciplinary actions by the different boards in the nation, and also how the EPPP2 would purports to, or it says that it's to protect the public, but actually the public is being harmed more by these exams, and EPPP2 is just going to compound that. And I speak as an individual who it took 4 years to get licensed as a psychologist in the state of California, and I passed on my 5th attempt. And how these exams are more of a linguistics exam than it is about the competence. And I welcome, and I've even recorded some podcasts on this very issue, video podcasts with at least 15 people who have had the courage to share their stories, because institutions, including ASPPB, keep saying that we don't have the research, that we don't have the evidence for this. And I invite people to listen to at least 15 recorded stories that who fear the EPPP2. And in actuality, in Arizona, the EPPP2 was discontinued after a presentation from the ASPPB. And so I'm really curious about the history, and I will comment, and I'll reserve some other comments for the next agenda item. But I did want to speak to this statement that the ASPPB does not believe that this would create a barrier, when in fact, many individuals believe that it would. And I speak from personal experience, and that I was not able to serve during the pandemic and in the throes of the pandemic because I was not licensed. And what a journey it was, and the harm that I've also experienced from these exams. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez Arenas.
And with that, there are no other requests for comment. Shall we return to the agenda? Wait, I take that back. We have a hand raised from Kimberly Boyd Bowman. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
There are definitely some linguistic and cultural biases. I would also note that California has a disproportionate number of unaccredited and PsyD programs, which have a historically significantly lower pass rates, which frankly has to do with the less rigorous academic background of most of those programs. I think that if you look at the difference in pass rates for the accredited schools and for the PhD programs, you will note significant differences. And for many states, that's why they do not allow the unaccredited students to sit for the exams. I am not sure that many of those programs do provide adequate clinical training, so I'm not sure that we would see the same differentials with the part 2 that we do with the part 1.
Ma'am, can you, I'm sorry, this is Lavinia Snyder, examination coordinator. Can you clarify when you say accredited, do you mean APA accredited programs or regional accreditation?
This is the moderator. Hold on just a moment, Kimberly. If you would raise your hand again, I will get you back up and unmuted.
Sorry about that. I had muted myself after I finished my comment. I'm referring to the APA accreditation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Roxanne. Hold on, Roxanne. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone, followed by Virginia and then Araceli again.
Hi, thank you. I'd just like to address what the speaker right before me just said. So it has been shown empirically that the EPPP1 is highly correlated with the general GRE. And when we're talking about traditional PhD programs that only admit small numbers of students, one of the criteria for admittance is high GRE skills. So that can explain why higher EPPP pass rates might be there for traditional PhD students, because we're already using something that is highly correlated with the EPPP. So it has nothing to do with the accreditation or the rigorous academic. It has to do already with something that was pre-existing. So I'd just like to clarify that, and let's make sure that we're making decisions based in science.
I just wanted to remind everyone again that the public comment is on the history, not on the exam. We'll have plenty of opportunity to have a discussion on the exam on the next agenda item. For this agenda item, it's mostly with regards the EPPP that was presented by Ms. Snyder. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Virginia Bennett. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
I did want to clarify the process, because it sounded like there were these initial objections about the Part 2 exam, and then it kind of basically went back into the committee, and the committee is saying they reviewed the objections and they didn't really find them legitimate, so now they think that the exam is acceptable and it won't impede licensure. It seemed like there was a little bit of a gap, like there were all these objections to it, and then suddenly they're saying, no, it's not a problem and it's going to work. But kind of what was happening in between there, or perhaps I missed something in your description.
This is Lavinia Snyder. There were objections by the task force, but they also didn't want to lose portability. I think that was the biggest thing. They didn't want to lose the ability to be considered for the EPPP if ever they had to move to another state or and get licensed in that state. So due to that concern, if they had a if the board of directors did decide to mandate and make it a two-part exam, the board had wanted something in place that would make it a smooth transition for board staff. So we created this workflow so that we can just outline what steps we would need to take in order to implement that. And that's if they did decide to implement it and it become a two-part exam.
So
nothing was really set in stone at that time.
Okay, but you're saying then it was sorted out how to deal with the portability problem? Is that what kind of made the transition to more?
I think Mr. Fu has his hand raised. Dr. Kasuga.
Mr. Fu.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. I'm going to supplement Ms. Snyder's comments with, and I think, and try to answer the question here, which is the this issue is coming back up because the ASPPB has decided that the EPPP is a two-part exam consisting of part one, a knowledge-based exam, and part two, a skills-based exam. Previously, the EPPP, because of the advocacy of this board and because of the advocacy of the EPPP task force that Dr. Kusuga led as chair of that task force, the ASPPB decided to halt implementation and make the EPPP Part 2 an optional exam, allowing for jurisdictions who wanted to be, quote, early adopters to take on both exams. What's before us today as a committee, and why we're revisiting this issue is because the Association of Provincial and State Psychological Boards has said that there's going to be an implementation deadline of 2026, where all jurisdictions that use the EPPP will have to use both Part 1 and Part 2 as an exam. It would no longer just be an optional Part 2. So that's why we're gathered here today for this discussion, and why Ms. Schneider provided that background for bringing us together and sort of level setting and making sure that everybody has a shared understanding of past actions related to this exam.
Well said, Mr. Fu. Can we welcome the next public comment, please?
Absolutely. Next, we have Araceli again. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Oh, thank you. I had just commented, and again, I want to, if this is about the history, then I don't know if my comments are more pertinent for the actual implementation of it, but to what one of the speakers was saying about the type of programs and accreditation, just to comment on that, this is a linguistics exam. We don't really know what exam 2 is. We haven't seen any test prep material. You know, everybody's just kind of blind leading the blind. And I completed a PhD program in an APA accredited program and APA internship. So this isn't just necessarily.
Sorry, Miss. I'm sorry, Dr. Lopez. I think pertinent for the next agenda item, and what we can do is make sure that you're like first in line for that one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Next,
okay, go on. Sorry.
My apologies. Next, we have Kenneth Sider. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, I am wondering, was the potential discriminatory effects of these exams investigated in vetting this and coming up with any sort of recommendations? I hear that the question was raised: is it discriminatory? Is it really keeping certain people out? With a linguistics exam, which purports to be an exam of content, and has that question been investigated, and has it been determined that that is not a problem with the exam?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Sider.
Yes.
As far as the history of it, I believe that we've invited ASPPB to talk about and address those questions in the past. And what they did was they informed us of how they mitigate for bias, and how they continue to make sure that they can minimize any bias with regards those disparities. That's like what has happened in the past in terms of those concerns that were raised. And as part of the Board of Psychology is concerned, we were continuing to engage with ASPPB to make sure that that those those are constantly raised, and we bring forth any concerns that our stakeholders raise to ASPPB, whether it's with regards access to care, and disparities in and biases that that are brought up as concerns.
So what it sounds like is the board asked ASPP to answer the question that they were investigating themselves, and that the board itself didn't do an independent, separate investigation about that question. Is that
We did
correct?
an audit. We did an audit as well. We did like an audit. Our Office of Professional Examination Services (OPS) is with the California Department of Consumer Affairs, and they conducted an audit as Ms. Snyder presented, and it's on attachment C, I believe, of the combined packet. I think it's on page 91.
Okay. The other thing, I looked for packets. I did not get some of the packets that are being referred to when I went on the board and pulled things up. So I don't know if other people have those packets, but anyway, thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment, please?
Dr. Lopez Arenas has a hand up. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you.
This is Antoinette. While you're doing that, I just wanted to draw folks' attention to the board's website. If you go to the home page and click on board meetings, all the meeting materials are posted online, as we do for all of our committee and board meetings. So you can access the board's meeting materials on the website. Thank you.
Yes, to answer Dr. Kenneth, I don't recall the last name, Cider. Apologies for that. There is research that has independent, peer-reviewed publications by Sharpless in both 2009, 2013, 2019, and 2021, that his research has shown that there is adverse impact on Blacks and Latinos. And the first study was conducted in New York, and then he did another study in Connecticut that confirmed the results from the first publication. And so there is his research. One of them is predictors of program performance on the EPPP, where they did examine what type of program you went to, whether it's a PsyD, whether it's a PhD, whether it's accredited, whether it's not accredited. And regardless, there is adverse impact on regardless of program. And there's also the 2019 article is our demographic variables associated with performance on the examination, on the EPPP in the Journal of Psychology. And in 2021, there's a study, pass rates on the EPPP according to demographic variables of partial replication. And not only is he the one that has been speaking about this, there's been dissertations, there's 2 dissertations, Armstrong 2020, Chaparro 2020. They actually came out in the same year. And I'm happy to provide a reference list, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at least 11, and I keep track of these, at least 11 peer-reviewed publications that have spoken to the adverse impact, and that's for EPPP 1. And there's also, we still have yet to see EPPP 2, but we need to do the research, right? And so, but there is peer-reviewed research on this.
Again, this is like a comment on the exam. So we're hoping to kind of like get this public comment section just exclusively on the history, please.
Sure, I'm responding to his comment on the research, and I'm saying that there is research.
Thank you. Next public comment, please.
There are no other requests for public comment at the moment. Shall we return to the agenda?
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so since this is so let me see if there's any other comments from the committee members. And I can't really see hands raised, so if you want to unmute, just like go ahead. If not, since this is for information only, we can move on to the next agenda item.
This is Dr. Harb Sheets. I'm fine with moving on.
Thank you. Mr. Fu?
Same here.
Okay. Okay, moving on, we'll move on to agenda item number 6. Which is the discussion possible approval of the EPPP Part 2 skills exam effective January 1, 2026. And I welcome Ms. Sorik to present.
Good morning, committee members and members of the public. Included in the meeting materials is a memo which lays out where the situation with a two-part exam is. As was discussed in the history section, the EPPP Part 2 was an opt-in exam, and that based on the Board of Directors decision by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, will be a two-part national exam effective January 1, 2026. So included in the meeting materials is a staff recommendation that based on the cost of developing the board's own national or own practice exam and concerns regarding portability to practice in other states. If a California licensee wanted to practice in another state, the staff recommendation is to continue to use ASPBB for the national licensure exam as a two-part exam, January 1, 2026, and that staff will work with legal counsel to develop the statutory and regulatory language to move forward with implementation of a two-part exam at that time.
All right. Any questions or comments from the committee members? Please feel free to unmute your mic and speak because I can't see the hand raising on my platform.
This is Dr. Harb Sheets. Thank you, Ms. Zorik, for this memo that sets out what our options are. So you're confirming in your memo then that we would not have an option to offer in California both the Part 1 and Part 2, but for anyone who wants, for example, to stay in California, that they could only take the Part 1 and get licensed here. That ASPPB is saying to us, no, this is, our exam is being changed as of January 2026. So it is in fact two parts. There is no longer a Part 1 option. I just wanted to confirm that.
That is correct. If the board would like to continue to utilize a national exam provided by ASPBB January 1, 2026 and beyond, that would be a two-part exam. The alternative is the board developing its own practice exam, but that would limit licensees to California practice only.
Thanks. I just wanted to to clarify that, particularly for anyone who does not have the packet and has not been able to read your email.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harbsheets.
Ms. Sorek, can I, and maybe OPS might be the right folks for this question, but I'm curious, a couple things, because I was both on the task force and then subsequently on licensure and legislative and regulatory affairs. I feel like I've made my fair way around the committees here on the board. And I'm curious to just hear from you, and in terms of California having their own exam, because I think what I just heard from your answer to Dr. Harbsheets is that if we don't move forward with this, we would have to create our own exam. From discussions with your colleagues at other DCA boards, what's the length of time it typically takes to develop your own exam?
I would defer to, I believe Dr. Welch-Gandy is in the participants list on the time it would take to develop that exam. I know we have in the memo the cost it would take to develop the exam, or a rough estimate of that, but I'm not positive on the time frame. Mr. Bowie, perhaps we can promote Amy Welch-Gandy from the attendees list to the panel.
That would be great.
Welcome, Amy. You should be able to unmute at will.
Good morning. This is Amy Welch-Gandy from OPES, and it would likely take about a year to year and a half. There's the development factor, and then there's also beta testing that we would have to do as well. So it would be quite a lengthy process. We do have the cost sheet that's in the meeting materials that kind of shows the, not necessarily the timeline, but all of the tasks involved.
Thank you so much for that. And so I think if we were assuming that there was that recommendation going to the board, it looks like the board would probably then review that recommendation from us at its next board meeting in May. And so presumably if we were to go down that route, the earliest we would start is probably this fall for the development of this exam, and then probably have something in place by the middle or end of 2026. Does that sound right?
Yes.
So, and just to follow up on that piece, I'm assuming that would be a conservative timeline that assumes everything goes well. So does that mean then, Ms. Sorek, that the board will not license any new psychologists from January 1st, 2026 through whenever our new exam is in place?
That would be correct. If we didn't have a practice examination in place, we could only offer the law and ethics exam, which right now, as our language is written, must be completed before eligibility to take the law and ethics exam. So that could push that timeline out even further for individuals to get licensed with the board.
Thank you. And this question might be better oriented for Ms. Chung. I just to get a sense of numbers, a refresher, how many applicants does the board have in a year typically for licensure? Or to take the EPPP exam, I should say.
I think we are averaging 1,500 annually.
And how many new psychologists end up being licensed in a year?
We issue about also the same amount, sometimes more, just because of the licensure process that previous applicants could be getting licensed this year.
Understood. So what I'm hearing then is that there's a potential for somewhere between 1,500 to 1,700 individuals who will have to wait for licensure for a year because there won't be an exam here in California. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Ms. Gandy, Ms. Welch Candy, excuse me, and if you have a PhD, I forgot, please correct me. I'm happy to.
I do not.
Okay, no worries. I just want to be respectful. Yes. Ms. Welch Candy, can you remind us about the cost again for developing our own exam?
Sure. We estimated about 60,000, a little over 60,000 for the development. That's just our initial guesstimate. Additionally, there would be costs for subject matter experts because there's travel involved, and the board pays subject matter experts to participate. There would also be costs for obtaining references and things like that.
Would we have to conduct an occupational analysis, Amy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we would. Thank you. And that would be an additional cost, which is.
And this would be just a single exam, right? Combining both knowledge and laws and ethics. Correct.
We could combine the two.
I think from having heard from my board members at our last previous board meeting, I'm not sure there's interest in combining the EPPP or the content of what the EPPP exam would be and the complete into one exam. At least based on what I heard last go around, but that was really helpful. And also just a question on the cost. You would have to also contract with a vendor, correct? Beyond the $60,000 on an ongoing basis?
A vendor to administer the exam?
Correct.
That's already part of the fee, I believe. It would continue to be as it is now. It would be part of the fee to take the examination. So right now, candidates pay to take the CPLEE or the EPPP, and the fee that is paid to PSI or Pearson VUE is part of the fee that they pay to take the exam.
Understood. That's really helpful. Those are the ongoing costs associated with fees. All right. So the one other question I'll have, and I think I'll turn this back over to you, Ms. Sorick, is based on the current fiscal situation for the board, what's the likelihood we would be able to identify about somewhere between the $60,000 minimum? So so if you include SMEs and all the other things that Ms. Strander has said, I'm assuming the cost will be northwards of somewhere between $80,000 to $100,000. Where would that be in our budget presently?
So we don't have, this is Antoinette, we don't have the line item funding for that cost because those costs are based on the exam costs that are kind of pre-anticipated ahead of time. I also want to point out that the dollar figure that applicants pay to take the exam is determined by the outside vendor, which in this case right now is ASPBB. But if this was a cost from applicants to the board, that would have to be established in law. And we would have to get the authority to charge that fee. So I just also wanted to put that into consideration as well, that we would need the authority. And perhaps Ms. Ng can speak to that piece as well. We have our fees right now established in statute, so we would need approval from the legislature to have a fee to take the exam. And so that would require a legislative change.
Understood. And then my understanding of our state budget currently is that we're going to be experiencing a $25 billion deficit, and that, and I've heard actually from some folks who are in this space that we might be looking at even $40 billion deficit. I know we are an enterprise fund or a special fund that is outside of the general fund, but from past recessions or past budget deficits, has there been a a request of even the special funds to take a fiscally prudent course in alignment with general fund programs?
Historically, that is something that has been asked of the programs. And if programs had enough in reserve to make a loan to the general fund, that has also been something that has been exercised in the past 20 years.
And I know the board has been asked to provide that loan on several occasions, and we've just got paid back from those fiscal years. And I know that we aren't in the position to make that loan this go around. So I think what I'm hearing then is that it's unlikely that if there's going to be a request for folks to take cuts, that it might be difficult for us to put in a budget request to fund the study of creating a new exam. Is that a logical conclusion to that?
I don't think that would necessarily be the case, but it may be more of an uphill challenge given our own budget situation and the state's budget situation.
Got it. I appreciate the fact that you can't speak in sureties and that you're trying to make sure that you're giving accurate information to the board so that,
right.
So I understand that you can't make a confirmation that exactly will happen, but it sounds like there's going to be some serious advocacy that's going to be required. Okay, so this is all really helpful information because I think when I was on the task force, I expressed real concerns about the EPPP Part 2 exam, and for all the reasons that Ms. Snyder shared. And I think we've been in conversation with ESPPB, and I've seen them take some steps to address some of those issues that we raised. And I think there's still some opportunity for further discussion about what we can do. But I'm truly concerned about the potential that for a year at minimum, we won't be able to license 1,500, 1,700 new applicants to take an exam, a licensure exam, and to be a licensed psychologist. And what that would do in terms of equity for our communities to access mental health care. I think it's concerning to me that if we won't be able to license new folks for a whole year, that this would be a real detriment from a consumer protection perspective for both existing clients as well as prospective clients. And so that's something that is certainly weighing on my mind as I've heard this information and the impacts here. I am curious if actually, let me check in. Dr. Kusuga, am I taking up too much time? Can I ask a couple more questions?
Go ahead. I really appreciate your line of questioning, and I am also curious to hear more about the potential consequences of either option. So go ahead.
And Dr. Harpsheets, do you mind that I'm monopolizing my time?
I would like to make some comments when you're done too. And so, but go ahead, Mr. Fu.
Dr. Harpsheets, I'm mindful that I've taken a lot of time, so I'll wrap up my questioning too. I think we have ESPPB here on as well. Is that correct, Ms. Sorek?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to confirm as well that we have two from ESPPB, Dr. Song and can you help me out, Ms. Sorek?
I think if I recall correctly, it's Dr. Bernetti Atwell.
Yes,
who might be
there you
in
go.
attendance. Could the moderator please promote those two individuals so that I can ask a question?
What names are we looking for, please?
Last name, Bernetti Atwell. B as in boy, You are. So I don't see them.
If they are a call-in user, please dial *3 to raise your hand.
In the meantime, while we're waiting, I'm wondering if I could please comment. This is Dr. Hardsheets.
Oh,
Go
please do.
ahead.
Sorry, Dr. Upsheets.
Is that okay?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to express my honest dismay about feeling that our hands are tied in this, that if we are, as Mr. Fu has pointed out and Ms. Sorick, that if we were to go the route of trying to come up with our own exam, it's really going to be prohibitive, not just from the cost, but the issues of not being able to license people. And so as I've tried over the years, as we've talked about this, to think outside the box, it's been really hard. And the only option I see for us is this question: what potential do we have to influence the EPPP2 in terms of the content and the way it impacts people and any other aspects that don't lead to the EPPP2 truly, in fact, being a barrier to licensure for our California potential psychologists. So I'd like us to consider that in our conversation. What are the ways that if we do choose to recommend to the full board that we adopt the EPPP Part 2, are there ways that we can impact to make it less problematic for our California potential licensees? I just wanted to throw that out there as part of the discussion as we move forward.
I truly appreciate that, Dr. Hardsheets. I think that I too share your sentiment with regards having our hands tied, and thinking outside the box with regards ways we can, as a board, mitigate any barriers for our licensees with regard to address issues with regards potential access concerns, and I think that California as a state is very diverse, and so the need to have practitioners and licensees that are able to serve our diverse population with that matches the needs of Californians will be very important. And if there are any barriers to having that, that's something that I think we should be talking about on ways that we can have an impact if we don't have that much control with regards the exams that we'll be implementing. I just wanted to follow up on the ASPPB folks that are on the call, if we can promote them so they can answer some of Mr. Fu and Dr. Hardsheets' questions.
This is the moderator. We have caller 9 on the line. Will you please let us know your name?
I think that might be us. This is Dr. Marianne Bernetti Atwell and Dr. House Song with ASPPB.
Thank you and welcome. Mr. Fu, you'll have the floor to ask your questions.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I wanted to ask the question that a previous public comment raised around looking at the potential effects of the exam on, I think the term was discrimination, like the discriminatory effects of the exam. And if I'm trying to recall the presentation that Dr. Turner gave to us last go around, I think this was probably a year ago. But if I recall correctly, my understanding is that that ASPPB assembled a group of experts in terms of developing this exam, subject matter experts, and required them to take implicit bias training. Is that accurate, Dr. Bernardi Atwell?
Yes, that is accurate. That has been done for our item writers. And then we have a variety of exam committees that transcend in level before an item is actually appropriately vetted to even be a sample item. The other two items that I think is worthy to share with your group as you make these very important decisions is that ASPPB has also established a item review committee that looks at any items that who have appeared to have had some differential functioning, and a committee that is very diverse in makeup. And they go over any of those items to review them from potential bias or potential difference. And I'll let Dr. Song speak to how many of those items have been reviewed and what has happened with them, if that's helpful to you all.
Hi, this is Dr. Song. So thank you for your question. And as the producer of the EPPP, fairness is near and dear to our heart too. So we look at using that statistical method called differential item functioning to all these items on EPPP 1 and 2. We have reviewed over 2,000 items in use, and we only flagged a couple of dozens of items showed differential performance. And those are both ways, not necessarily only advantage one way for a certain group of takers. So they advantage sometimes to female, sometimes to male, sometimes to white Americans, sometimes to African Americans. So all ways, both ways. And we have a special item review committee composed of very diverse group of people, and they reviewed those items to see if there's any kind of language or cultural background related to cause those differential performance across different groups. And after careful review and deliberation, only less than 10 items, as I said, they are kind of a differential performing on both ways, not necessarily only advantage one group over the other. But those items showed differential performance across groups. So we feel those can be kind of potentially different one group over the other. So we remove those. But those kind of less than 0.5% of all items reviewed can potentially relate to any of those performance. So we remove those items. So this is a continuous quality improvement we are doing. I heard you are talking about create your own exams. I kind of very interested in knowing your thoughts, but given I have been working in this field for over 20 years, it's a huge undertaking. I joined the ASPPB only in January this year, take Dr. Turner's position. I worked in medical licensure certification after I got my PhD in psychometrics. So it's a huge undertaking. So every items for our exams need at least 2 to 3 years before they can become a scored item. So you said 1 year or a year and a half to come up a very kind of strong exam. That's very, very high kind of a goal. I just as a kind of a assessment expert, that's my opinion. So we are trying at the ASPPP with all your help and many, many other psychologists' help. It took us years to come up this part 2, part 1 exams, and we continue monitor their item performance. Every time item is used, we look at it and make sure they are still functioning as they intend to. It's a continuous quality improvement process. It's a very costly. So each item in my previous medical license exam, we said it was $2,000.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to interrupt because I have 2 more questions and I'm mindful of the time we have today. My first question is, you mentioned that the panel reviewing the questions were diverse, or that diversity was included. Can you describe to me what were the characteristics of diversity? So what do you mean by diversity? Is it racial diversity, gender diversity, backgrounds in terms of subject matter? Could you just provide some help elucidate for me what that diversity looks like?
Yes, all of the above.
Yes, it included those items that you just mentioned. We actually had a call for interest, and we had over 160 individuals interested in doing this work. And so our representation, I believe we have 11 individuals on this committee, and they have varying from gender, from ethnicity, from experience, of diverse populations. So I believe that it's diverse through a variety of lenses.
Sorry, excuse me. Mr. Fu, I just wanted to piggyback on your question real quick. With the 11 individuals in the committee, how many of those are from California?
I apologize. I don't know that right now. We could get that back to you. We actually weren't even aware of this meeting today. We are at a mid-year meeting, so we apologize for being tardy. We definitely do not want to leave you with an image that we did not think this call was important. We just weren't, it just wasn't in front of us, but we can get that for you. I just don't know right off the top of my head.
Yes, thank you so much, because I think that is what is important to us. Before Dr. Turner informed us of the composition of Californians in your processes, because I think that the definition and kind of like I think California is definitely more diverse than some of your other jurisdictions that is part of ASPPB. And second, also, like, I think that California's values when it comes to equity and diversity is exceptional, and we want that reflected, and those points of view reflected in your processes. So just wanted to know how many Californians are participating in the item review committee. Sorry, Mr. Fu, I'll bring it back to you.
No worries. I think those are all, I really appreciate those questions, and I'm curious about the answers to those as well. I thank you for jumping out of your own meeting and to attend this one, and really appreciate you being able to answer my questions. I don't have any further questions, but I think just for our board members discussion here, I'm really concerned about and I just want to echo Dr. Harpsheet's comments about how hamstrung we feel about the current situation we're in. And so, I would like to just put forth an idea for consideration, and we can turn it into a motion if there's some support for it. But what I would like to suggest to our full board for recommendation is that that this committee, the ad hoc committee, recommends to the Board of Psychology that we continue to use ASPPB for the licensure exam due to the initial and ongoing costs of a California-specific exam and concerns regarding the portability of the California license, and that we identify, and that the board staff comes back to the full board in 2026 with understanding our options for our own exam. So that we do feel like, so that we aren't not licensing. Let me actually pause there because there's a motion, and then I'll explain my motion if it's helpful.
Can you repeat your motion again? Sorry.
Sure. It's to move that the ad hoc committee recommends to the full board that we continue to use ASPBB for the licensure exam, and to request that staff provide a report to the board about developing our own exam in future years.
Is there a second?
I second it. This is Dr. Harpsheets.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Fu.
Sure. And I just because I think it would be doing us a disservice for us to not be able to license 1,500 to 1,700 people for at least 1 year. And it sounds like Dr. Song is skeptical that we can get something in place by then. But assuming we are doing our best and we are able to get something in place by 2027, I'm just really concerned, frankly, that we are losing a year out of licensure. And I think just to reflect the fact that a sense of like what does this path look like, and making sure that we continue to remain to have options, and to actually have the information to be able to make this decision. I think it's important for us to hear from staff to better understand what are the actual costs of developing this, not just like an estimated cost, but like what would this look like from an implementation perspective cost? What would this look like? These implications for portability, and also the actual implications for us in terms of how we would, like what type of exam we would want to administer, right? Because I think I've heard the board at least express interest in a skills exam, not just a knowledge-based exam. And so I think there are some questions about having our own exam that I think we would need some guidance on. And so I think this is an attempt to address the situation we're in, but also to make sure that we continue to have this conversation going forward with a report about what are the options before us.
Mr. Fu, I'm wondering if we could, I know I seconded that motion, but could we amend that to include that or maybe this would be a separate motion, so let me know. Could we amend that to include the idea that we recommend that staff, or we request that staff look into ways that we can on our end and work with ASPPB to minimize the barriers that the EPPP Part 2 edition will cause to our potential licensees.
I think that we can piggyback. This is an idea. How about we would need two motions. One would be the use of ASPPB for the licensure exam, and what Dr. Harpsheets is suggesting with regards and recommending that like staff
we help to identify ways
Yes,
that we can minimize the barriers created by the.
And then we'll have another motion for the second part of the original motion that Mr. Fu is suggesting with regards having staff report on exam development in the future. Because I think the related with regards the use of ASPPB and the other one is directing staff for a different exam. So I'm just thinking that maybe 2 motions will be required. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Fu, since you're the one who
Dr. Kasuga, this is Brittany Ng, and I might be able to help. Going back to Mr. Fu's proposed motion, I just wanted to get some clarification. Mr. Fu, in terms of the portion of your motion about continuing with ASPPB, I was curious if there was a timeline that you had in place. ASPPB is requiring the EPPP to be a 2-part exam effective January 1st, 2026. So in terms of that timeline and the direction to the board to look into an alternative exam, I was curious where that fell in that time frame.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you, Ms. Ng, for that question. So the purpose would be to have the exam in place until the board decides to pursue its own exam after the report back from staff. And I recognize that staff is in the throes of budget. We have got the fee analysis. We've got a couple bills moving. So I would imagine that the report back from staff would be from a couple years from now to just let this sit and see where it goes, so that we at least have that 1-year continuity, so that we would have be able to continue to license folks in 2026. So I would imagine that staff would come back to us with that report in a year and a half, and that this would still be in place until the board decides otherwise after learning more about that from that report, what to do forward. It also buys us time to be able to make sure that we continue to license individuals until a new exam is put in place, should the board take that option in future years.
Okay, so just to clarify, so your motion would propose continuing with ASPPB for the licensing exam and allowing the board to come back with a report on its own exam, which would contemplate potentially the EPPP Part 2 being adopted as a required exam if the board did not report back by that time? I think security may be helpful. And I'm just trying to get to the meat of making sure that it is clear.
Let me combine also these couple of things. One, I think we can do this all in one motion, right? So I'm happy to do that. And if Dr. Harpsheets feels like you would prefer to be the maker of this one motion, you're more than welcome to do it. I don't need to feel like my name is on it. So I think what I'm trying to suggest, Ms. Ng, and maybe you can help with the proper language, is that we're recommending the board to adopt the EPPP as a 2-part exam, because that's what ASPPB is saying. So making sure that ASPPB is continuing to provide this exam. And that exam is the licensure exam for the state of California. 2, that board staff reports back to the board at its Q3 2024, 2024 meeting to understand to analyze what pursuing our own exam would look like. And then the third piece, I think, from Dr. Harpsheets would be to continue to direct the direct our executive officer working with our board president to continue advocacy with ASPPB to address our concerns. Did that capture the sentiment right, Dr. Harpsheets, the last piece?
I would just add when you said to address our concerns regarding barriers for potential licensees to obtaining licensure in California.
What Dr. Harpsheets said.
Yeah, and that works for me.
Does that add clarity, Ms. Eng, or did I just muddle the waters?
No, that's perfect. I'm just going to repeat it with a little more clear language in terms of the timing. So if I'm understanding correctly, your motion was for the committee to recommend to the board, one, that the board continue with ASPPB as the licensing vendor, including the adoption of the EPPP Part 2 effective January 1st, 2026. Two, that the board staff report back to the board at the 2024 Q3 meeting to analyze what the pursuit of the board's own exam would look like. And three, for the board to direct the EO working in conjunction with the board president to continue advocacy with ASPPB regarding concerns about barriers for potential licensees in obtaining licensure in California.
That sounds good to me.
Can I ask, that's wonderful. I thank you for putting that. And Dr. Harpsheets, I'm happy to yield that motion to you if you would like. If that matters to you, I'm happy to take a second on it.
Oh, no. It's absolutely fine. And it sounds like it's an amended motion from what you originally proposed. And so I would second the amended motion, if that's in fact what it is.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay.
Can I ask an operational question real quickly, Dr. Kasuga, Madam Chair?
I just wanted to kind of like put it out there as well that we are gonna take a 5 to 10 minute break, but go ahead and ask your operational question, Mr. Fu.
I promise it will not be a very long one. Ms. Sorick, I just want to gut check real quickly before we move forward or to see if we can make amendment. Is that 1 year report back timeline enough time for you to be able to do that, or do you need more time? I want to make sure we're not jamming you with that.
Yes, we can accommodate that.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So with that motion by Mr. Fu and a second by amended motion by Mr. Fu and seconded by Dr. Harpsheets, we'll take a I would say 10-minute break. We'll return at 11:18. And we'll have further discussion and then go into public comment with regards the motion. And Ms. Prato, can you take the roll to see so we can reestablish quorum?
Of course. Kasuga. Kasuga?
Here.
Thank you. I know it's obvious. Fu.
Here.
Harpsheets.
Here.
Thank you. Roll is complete.
Okay. So we'll resume committee discussion, and I just wanted to jump right in with regards the language that we have with regards advocacy, continued advocacy of the board with ASPPB, and I just wanted to make sure that we have our ASPPB folks still in the line. Is that correct? The participants. Okay, I guess
it is.
I still see them. Okay, so more interested in kind of like specifics with regards mitigation and ways we can address the impact of the EPPP2 with regards barriers and how we can mitigate those barriers. And one of the questions that I have is with regards reports that we can get in terms of the item review committee's findings with regards the things that you're tracking to address those disparities. And so are these reports on those, and are they available to the public? And this is for EPPP, if they can answer. I see their hands raised. Are they able to?
They are unmuted.
Okay.
I saw them flash the hand. Caller 9, if you would hit *3, you will likely mute yourself again.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. We are so sorry for these problems. I'll let Dr. Howe speak to that.
Yeah, we do have a minute after each item review committee meeting. So if you are interested in knowing those, yeah, we can prepare reports and make it available to you.
Perfect. And are you looking at relation of the item review committee findings and pass rate disparity, like whether it's correlating in some meaningful way? Because if you're like if you're finding this differential items, but the pass rate disparity doesn't change much, then it's kind of like not really having an impact. And I understand that a lot of things are affecting pass rate disparity, whether it's like socioeconomic ability to buy test reviewers, for instance, commercial test reviewers, or like having 3 jobs while taking the EPPP. I know those are factors that we cannot address, but I think that it's good to continue to look into things like that, because that's really at the end of the day, what is the impact of this test. But it's good to have those reports. And I'm also wondering if we can get information with regard tracking the participation of Californians in the item creation and item review and all the processes. That way we can have that information available to us, and that we can discuss in our board meetings or report it in our board meetings.
Sure, we would be happy. In fact, while you all were on break, we were able to pull the information on the item review committee. It is a 9-person committee, and there are 2 individuals representing California on that committee. So out of 9, I'm happy to say 2 are from your state. We will need a little more time just because we don't have all the documents in front of us as to all the volunteers that are touching all the multi-levels of the exam, but we're happy to pull those numbers for all the other exams also and that to you. The other thing, if I may, when you speak to disparities and barriers, we do have a sample exam that is just coming out for the 2, much like a sample exam that's been accessible for the 1. So we do think that that is something that is going to benefit. In fact, Dr. Song, you may even want to speak to some of the review you've done with the analysis of data on the impacts of individuals utilizing a sample exam.
Yeah, as you said, there are many factors relate to this different performance. So one thing I did look at it is people who utilize the practice exam. Now we are going to call them sample exams. 2 new sample exams are out yesterday for part 1, and 1 brand new sample exam will be out for part 2 in the next week or so. So those who used sample exams to familiarize themselves with the content and the format of the examination benefit tremendously, especially for those underrepresented groups. I have seen 10 to 20% increase in their passing rate. So definitely use the sample exams to be familiar with the exam. That really help people.
And that is free?
Sorry?
Is that free, or is there a fee associated with that?
It's not free, because that also takes time to produce, but that's very minimal. Like if you take it online, $30.
Okay.
However, we also have allowed individuals to be able to take it in the test center in an effort to also help with that exposure before taking the actual test. And the rate with that is, it's really the setting fee, and it's in around $80 some. And ASPPB back in 2020, the board made a very concerted effort to reduce the cost for that and the part 2 in an effort to really minimize that additional cost also. So there were some efforts that have gone into that.
Okay, thank you. So that's good information. I also wanted to talk about how frequently are you having town halls, and just wanted to make sure that the Board of Psychologists informed, and probably California stakeholders are informed of those town halls, so they can be part of engagement with ASPPB. I think that is one way to have direct advocacy, because I'm more interested in making sure that if we put this motion in place, and if it passes, and if we're recommending this to the full board, that those advocacy are really actionable, and that they're as specific as possible, so we can assure the full board that we are really addressing the potential effects of adding this the EPPP2 and the barriers that it can pose to our consumers. I mean, to our state.
Yes, I think you bring up some very important points. In fact, one thing that Dr. Song and I have been doing is we have been presenting to jurisdictions in regards to a bit of a fact and myth about the exam, because I believe, as you mentioned earlier on this call, there's been a variety of journals and documents that have spoken to the exam. And in many of those situations, we were not given the opportunity to have a joiner or to be included. So it seemed like we've had to be playing catch up with some of these things. So we've developed a PowerPoint that speaks to many of those concerns, such as why is this test been developed? 2, is it biased? you spoke about Dr. Sharpless, and I'm happy to say that the board back in about 2020, 2021 also developed a advisory group of individuals from the training and education community and the test community to include Dr. Sharpless. He actually sits on our committee, and they are reviewing various elements about the exam. And so that's really exciting for us because I think the association is just continuing to try to be very transparent, very responsible, and I appreciate being able to share that with you.
Thank you. And another thing that I think is important with regards to advocacy is I would like the board to be able to request to write to EPPP and require answers for some of our stakeholder concerns. One of the things that was brought up earlier, which should have been brought up at a later time, but it has also been brought up previously in previous EPPP meetings, both the stakeholder and the ad hoc committee that we had previously, is how this is a very linguistic exam, and that that there are individuals that have English as a second language having difficulties with that as a barrier. And I can speak to it myself because I took the test. It wasn't that long ago that I took this test, and it is hard for someone who is not a native English speaker to take a test in a foreign language. And yeah, it's kind of like being an English speaker and taking it in Spanish or another language. It's just really a barrier. And if there are any kind of considerations in terms of time allotments for those tests, and if that is available in for people to know that they have options, and there are ways that this test can be made more equitable to people with learning disabilities, people that have English as a second language, and all that.
Yes, we do help with that as some extra time to accommodate that reading. So this is a jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but yeah, we do have this English language learner extra, like an hour or 45 minutes kind of accommodation to help with that, to mitigate. We also have a French version. For that's a different story, but yeah, in terms of what you said, to provide some kind of disability accommodation, that's extra time for English language learner.
And you only have French as an alternative language, because that's I'm a little bit curious about that. There's no Spanish version of it. The only alternative version is French so far.
Dr. Kasuga, that's because Quebec in Canada, French.
Got it.
French and English are the two official languages for Canada, and Canadian provinces are included as a part of the EPPP exam. So that's why French is included. It's an official language of Canada.
Is there any information about developing a Spanish test or other languages?
No, not at this time. There was activities that occurred in the past around Spanish, and it did not go well. And in other professions, this has also been a challenge because of the varying dialects. It was very difficult to be able to produce a test that was really appropriate for all. So there is a whole history in regards to that resulted in some negative, less than positive outcomes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to bring it back to committee members, and then we had to public comments.
I have no more comments at this time. This is Dr. Harbsheets.
Thank you, Dr. Harbsheets. Mr. Fu?
None here. Public comment would be great.
Okay, so in terms of public comments, before we open it up, I understand that a lot of people earlier have shown interest in making a public comment for this particular agenda item, and I appreciate you waiting for your turn to express your comments. For the sake of time and being able to allow for everybody to have the opportunity to speak, we will limit the comments to 3 minutes at a time. If you wanted to have further comments, you can wait and like have your turn again. If you are sharing the same thing as a previous speaker, please feel free to just the speaker's sentiments and have an opportunity and efficient way to hear everyone's comments. Mr. Moderator, can you open the public comments?
Yes, we are accepting public comment for agenda item 6, and we have a motion on the floor. We will have a 3-minute time limit for comments with a 30-second warning. And like was said earlier, if your 3 minutes is up, we will mute you. You will have the opportunity to get back in line if time allows. And Kimberly Boyd Bowman, you are the first in our comments section. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, this was a little while ago, and I know there's the motion about possibly utilization of the EPPP until we would develop another one. But I'm wondering about, like, if the plan is for California to proceed with developing its own exam. My concern, like the one ASBPB board member mentioned, is that this is in order to get a good validated measure that accounts for all of these issues of preventing bias and good item analysis and all of those sorts of things. Like, it's going to take a while. Why would we not, if that's the direction we're going to move in, go ahead and start working on this now rather than waiting until 2026?
Dr. Kasuga, I think it's my understanding that we're answering all the questions at the end of public comment. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Fu. Thank you, Dr. Boyd Bowman. We have the next public comment, please.
Next, we have Dr. Lopez Arenas. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, thank you. First and foremost, thank you so much for allowing for public comment and having such a thorough discussion on something that impacts so many people's lives and livelihood. One of the questions that I have, and this would be for anybody, but in particular ASBPB, I know that there was a meeting in Arizona on February 10th, 2023 of this year, and quote unquote, where the board voted to rescind the requirement to take and pass Part 2 to qualify for licensure effective immediately. And I'm wondering if somebody could help understand what happened, why it happened. I know that Arizona was an early adopter, and I believe that it was on the date of the board meeting that requirement was rescinded. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kenneth Sider, followed by Danielle Keenan. Hold on just a moment, Kenneth. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry, I'm new to the process, and I'm still back on item 5, which was the history. And I wondered if the board had investigated separating out Part 1 from Part 2, like it sounds like Arizona has done, even though the test will be combined at 2026, is there a way we can request that it's, broken out so we only take part one? It seems a little bit like the tail wagging the dog. We're adopting this because that's what they're doing. And I don't think that's a good idea. California has been on the leading edge of a lot of things, and I would include psychology. So that's my comment. It's really for 5, the history, as opposed to 6, but it could be 6 too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Danielle, followed by Roxanne. Hold on, Danielle. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Here today. I am someone who has a long history with this issue. I was a member of the Examination Stakeholder Technical Advisory Group, which was previously mentioned as having Dr. Sharpless as a member. I will note that myself, a psychologist here in California, and another member, Dr. Tim Strauman, both resigned from that committee in protest of mischaracterization of our alleged support for the exam in multiple public forums. So it's not as though people with dissenting voices have consistently been included and respected as a part of that process. I think that's an important thing for us to note here. I also wanted to raise the question to the board of whether there has been any discussion with other stakeholder groups, including Board of Psychologists from other states, or people within the examination field more broadly, about whether there could be a collaborative effort to develop an alternative to the EPPP process. I know that California is not the only state board feeling unhappy about the amount of pressure coming from ASPPB, sort of feeling like their hands are tied around adopting an exam process about which they're not fully on board. So I know there have been discussions among other stakeholder groups, including other boards of psychology, and I'm curious about whether the California board would be open to collaborating, have initiated any of those conversations, or whether there really is a sense that if an alternative is developed, it needs to be specific to California.
Thank you. Next, we have Roxanne. Hold on, Roxanne. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. Okay, we see you've unmuted, but we haven't heard you yet. Bear with us just a moment, Roxanne. We're going to send you another request to unmute your microphone, and I'm going to pull up a technical slide to see if we can offer you some options as to your audio. Okay, hopefully this will give you an opportunity to come forward with some audio. I'm going to switch slides on you.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Can you
yes.
hear me?
Welcome.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, great. I'm sorry about that. I wanted to second the previous speaker's suggestion to collaborate with other states. I'd also like to mention that the cost of the test is not the only cost. You're including the cost of examinees for prep materials and the cost of lost wages for the time that it takes for the examinee to pass the exam. And that includes if they have to retake exams. Lost wages are nothing to ignore. And then the racial bias of this test that we know exists, we have data from that, and research is out there now. is just too important to ignore. We just simply cannot ignore the racial bias of that. And for the concern about people moving to other states and wanting to have that licensure reciprocated over there, their EPPP scores transported to another state, that proportion of people is simply too small compared to the number of people getting licensed to really make that the primary concern in adopting EPPP. I just don't see how that small proportion of people should be the primary concern here. Also, I'd like to see research on public protection if we are adopting EPPP. How is the public being protected simply from having somebody take the EPPP? Is there any value to having EPPP at all, or any type of gatekeeping test at all? And we really should be, figuring that out if it even does add any value over taking just the CPLEE and having the clinical skills assessed during training. Colleges are moving away from standardized testing because of known racial bias in standardized testing. So what are colleges doing? And can we model this off of what colleges are starting to do? And I'd really like to address ASPPB's comments about the item analyses. It's not about items on the test. This is about the system of test taking overall. So I'd like to end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next we are through all of our initial requests. We have a request from Dr. Lopez Arenas. Hold on just a moment. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, thank you. And I believe the questions are going to be answered towards the end. I did submit some comments in here. I appreciate the last speaker, Dr. Roxanne Yupa Crenshaw, in her comments. I concur. And I suggested earlier, I'm not aware of any correlational studies on the EPPP, whether you pass or number of times that you've taken it and any disciplinary actions. And to add as well to the cost, that I use the California Board of Psychology numbers that are publicly available in comparison to across the years that I've been keeping track. I'm a data person. And I also saw the report where multiple test takers were addressed. And in my very basic, not very robust statistical, calculations, all I did was count the number of people that are reported as passing. I subtracted based on those how many were first-time passers to get a multiple test taker number, and then I multiply that multiple test taker number by the cost of the exam, which is $687.50, I believe. And my calculations show that it is a $1.5 million cost for repeat test takers just for California, just in 2022 or 2021. I need to revisit those numbers. And so we're talking millions. And I, from personal experience, myself and others, were kind of the loss of income. And even then, now that I'm licensed, I have applied for 3-4 different jobs. And instead of measuring or paying me based on commensurate on experience, which is over 15 years of experience, my salary is based on the day that I was issued a license by the California Board of Psychology, not on my experience, but on the date that this license was issued. So not only are we facing loss of income, that this follows us. And I just found out yesterday that there is an applicant now licensed that lost her job after 6 years because her number expired because she didn't pass the EPPP. And she was dismissed. It was COVID. She applied for unemployment, and now she is being investigated as potentially, unemployment fraud when she was not able to practice in her field, in her career, because of this. So we're talking millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
30 seconds.
Thank you. And so the EPPP would just compound those numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. And a quick note, something I heard was said about the Q&A box. That is available for me to keep track of requests for comments. That is not available to the board. If you have written comments in the board, hopefully you have spoken them, or I highly recommend that you copy what you've written and send it in an email to the board. And with that, we have no other requests for comments.
Thank you.
My apologies. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just like to provide a chance to answer some of the questions that were posed with regards some of the studies that they were asking, and I think there was like some as well. Oh, and if you can answer some of the questions with regards early adopters.
I'm not exactly for sure what you're asking of us. So please, can you pose the question again?
Yes, there were some questions with regards any research on public protection.
Again, I feel like these are being taken out of context a little, and I think we're at a disadvantage right now. So in regards, one more time, please.
Sorry, do you mind if I jump in, Madam Chair, real quickly?
Yes, go ahead,
Thank you.
Mr. Fu.
So I think just taking a couple of the questions at hand, right? So I think one of the primary concerns is from our perspective, and I would invite Ms. Sorick and Ms. Chung and Ms. Monterrubio, they're available to talk about this as well, is that the purpose of a licensing exam at present right now, a knowledge exam, and then in the future, potentially a skills-based exam, is to make sure that the applicant has the knowledge and skills to practice safely with the best interests of the consumer in hand. And so my understanding, and I would also invite Dr. Welch-Gandy, also from OPES, in terms of how licensing exams are used as a form of consumer protection. I think that would be particularly helpful just to get an understanding, because all the boards, all the licensed professions under the Board of Consumer Affairs have a licensure exam. And so I think I want to underscore that the licensure exams are not about preventing a person from becoming a licensed psychologist. The licensing exams are to protect consumers from people who may not have this knowledge or skills to be able to practice safely and to protect the health and well-being of a person, and California in particular, given our purview as a state. So, Ms. Sorick, I would welcome your input on this, and perhaps also ask Ms. Welch-Gandy to also offer an insight in terms of how the state approaches licensing exams when it comes to consumer protections.
Hi, this is Antoinette. I'll start out the discussion and just kind of in a broad sense. The exams are offered to ensure that licensees have minimum competency in their field. When this was presented to the board initially from ASPBB, what was mentioned was that disciplinary data across the states was gathered on violations of the relevant practice acts. And based on the data that they received, they determined that a skills-based exam would fill the gap that was presented based on the data that they pulled. I don't want to speak for ASPPB, but I do remember that at the time this was presented, that was the information that was given to the board. And I will refer to Dr. Song for any additional information on that end. And Ms. Monterrubio, please feel free to jump in if there's anything else that you would like to provide from an enforcement standpoint regarding the examinations.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. That's really helpful to get us started on and framing this conversation with regards to the need for licensing exam to establish a minimum requirements and how it was why the EPPP 2 or skills based exam came about from the information from various jurisdictions and the types of violations that were seen. So do we have Ms. Monterrubio on the line?
Yes, I'm here, Dr. Kasuga. How can I help you?
No, I'm just like, if you wanted to add anything to that. Also, just wanted to make sure that that ASPPB is still on the line to kind of like add anything to that.
No, I'm here and I've heard the discussion. I really don't have anything to add from an enforcement perspective. Of course, as many of you know, we do have individuals who are going to be reinstated or even placed on probation. They may have to take the EPPP, but I don't have any type of statistical data to provide as to the outcomes of those exams. So I really don't have anything to add from an enforcement perspective today.
Okay, thank you. While I still have you, sorry, I just wanted to just about the question with regards discussions with other stakeholders and with other boards. Can you speak a little bit about what the Board of Psychology has participated in the past in terms of discussions with other jurisdictions regarding the EPPP 2?
Sure. We at the California Board of Psychology have been part of national discussions on this issue for many years. Early on, when ASPPB was initially looking at a two-part exam, we were part of teleconference meetings with other board executives. Later at mid-year meetings and annual meetings, when I was able to attend in New Mexico and Savannah, Georgia, discussions around the EPPP at that time and getting hearing input from other states. And Mr. Fu, as well as Dr. Phillips, additionally attended a San Francisco meeting of the Board of Directors where the EPPP was also discussed. And at all of those times, the EPPP Part 2 was an opt-in exam discussed at those times once it was ready to be launched, which it was in the recent past. So I haven't been part of any national discussions about this issue since the Board of Directors made the decision that the national exam would be a two-part exam.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. At this time, I'd like to bring back the discussion with the committee members, and we do have a motion on the table as well.
Thanks, Dr. Kasuga. I want to make sure that we answered the questions that were posed to us. And so to be clear, we answered the question about collaboration with other states. I think we had an open question, and I think Dr. Bernetti Atwell was trying to reply, but was potentially having difficulty coming off of mute because I saw a little microphone light up next to her button. So I just would like to ask if you would be able to just see if they're able to come off mute and to help answer the question around why the licensing exam is a part of a consumer protection regimen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. Mr. Moderator, are we able to help
Yes.
caller 9?
Yeah, caller 9, you show as unmuted right now. Please dial *3 to remute and unmute again if you're having trouble with audio. Oh, my apologies. *3 is the hand, *6 is your mute. And we're going to send you a request to unmute once again. Oh, my apologies,
Hi.
Ms. Lopez.
Oh, were you?
Caller 9.
Hello?
Hello.
Here we go. All right. So I think the question that was before us is why the part 2, is that, would I be correct with that?
Yes, Dr. Bernetti. Well, the question is, what's the value of having a licensing exam for consumer protection?
Okay. Well, a licensing exam has been around since 1960, and it came into play. This was first, ASPPB was birthed out of Professional Affairs Committee, and the purpose of it was the establishment to assist with the focus on mobility, the focus of the movement across jurisdictions, and to develop an exam that would assist and provide a tool to jurisdictions as they are looking to appropriately identify individuals who are competent to be licensed at an entry level and to form a universal standardized exam. So that was really the beginning for the birth of this work, much like many other professions. So in about 2015, there was conversation with jurisdictions, amongst jurisdictions, with ASPPB that started this conversation about skills and the fact that skills were being assessed differently throughout all jurisdictions, and the concerns about the validity, the structured, and the universality of the information that was being received through supervisor ratings, oral exams, and so forth. So, and actually probably the reliability and how that. Can you still hear me?
We lost you for just a second. We heard reliability.
Okay. And so the two came about because of us trying to be responsive to the jurisdictions. And so, and looking at a competency exam that includes holistically skills and knowledge assessment. So this is a tool to, again, assist the jurisdictions in their responsibility to confidently license competent individuals to reduce any issues related to public safety. And that is the forefront. The mission for the regulatory bodies is that. And so that is where these activities have really been anchored to. Dr. Song, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I also want to kind of separate the license examination versus the educational examination. I heard the opt-out for SAT. That's these two examinations are completely for different purpose. License is for protect the public. So I want to be very clear on that. Our stakeholders, not only the candidate for licensing, but also mainly the public. Yeah, it is if you couldn't pass the first attempt, you need to retake it. That's costly, but also that help you to improve your skills and knowledge and protect the public. If you end up not let everybody enter into this field without any minimum confidence, that at a much higher expense of the public safety.
Thank you, Dr. Song and Dr. Bernetti Atwell. I think we had another question. Dr. Kasuga, from the public comments, can I ask that question or just remind folks what that question was?
Yes, certainly.
So Dr. Bernetti Atwell and Dr. Song, I think one of the questions was the state of Arizona had opted in to do was an early adopter of the EPPP Part 2. And one of the public comments was that they have decided that they are not going to do it anymore. Could you share a little bit more about that to the extent you're aware of this?
Sure, we would be happy to. We, yes, had a meeting as one of your individuals on this call had reported, and Arizona did choose to opt out, even though they have been involved with it. And the two reasons that they did, they, in their correspondence with us, was based on prep materials for individuals taking the two, and the other was cost. And so we were able to share with them the reduction of costs that has been made on behalf of the board. And we were able to also share with them that the sample exam was on the cusp of being published and made accessible, which, as Dr. Song said, it is now accessible in the next couple of weeks as it gets loaded in with Pearson. So those were the two issues with them.
Understood, and I won't ask you to speculate on what the state of Arizona will do next, but I appreciate you answering the public's question with regard to what happened at that recent meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Kasuga, I think I have one more question from my notes here from the public comment, if I just want to make sure that we get to it and so that we're attuned to what our public has asked us to answer. May I go ahead and ask that question?
Definitely, yeah. Thank you so much for for going back to those questions that I asked that weren't answered yet. That were posted and wasn't answered.
No worries. I think one of the questions that was also asked, or at least one of the themes of the questions that we heard across was around the necessity of the skills exam, and I think that's been partially answered. But I just wanted to ask again and highlight for Ms. Sorick and perhaps ASPBB the types of questions that the skills exam might be answering, and why is that different than the current exam now? And I know it sounds repetitive, but since it did come up a few times, I just want to make sure that we are attuned to that.
Yes, that's a great question. We did look at the correlations between 1 and 2. They are moderately positively correlated. About 30% of the variance of Part 2 score can be explained by Part 1, but another 70% of variance cannot. So that means Part 2 is tapped into something different from Part 1. So these two complement each other to measure the competencies of the licensees for their safe, independent practice. So we did look at that. And also part 2 with some new item types like videos and case questions followed by a sequence of questions. When you present it with a patient, that here's what they are talking about and what will you do first, second, then later, follow up, all these things. And also we have video questions and hotspot questions and multi-select questions, because sometimes you have more than one treatment plan. So you can choose multiple correct options. So all these, with the advance of technology, we modernize this Part 2 exams to reflect the real practice, the interaction between psychologists and their clients. Those skills, it's not only measured by the book knowledge in Part 1. You need to let people demonstrate through Part 2. They can talk with patients. They can deliver different messages. So they treat patients professionally. So all these things are additional value added to EPPP. So we do think this is definitely a distinct but complement element to EPPP Part 1.
Thank you, Dr. Song. And I just want to make sure that OPES has a chance to weigh in on the distinction since you conducted the review. Ms. Welch-Gandy, would you be so kind to offer your insights with regard to this question from the public?
Yes. No, I'm not sure where to start, but I believe that when we did our analysis, that when we met with subject matter experts, they agreed that the skills did measure a deeper kind of process with the item types being used. So presenting a scenario and allowing candidates to make decisions. It's not just a simple knowledge based. The item types are not just simple knowledge. They're a deeper measure of the skills that psychologists are required to have in practice.
Thank you. Dr. Kasuga, those were the questions I was tracking, and I just want to make sure that, and I know you were tracking questions too, so I just want to make sure that our lists are matched against each other in terms of collecting the themes and questions that came in.
I think so. I think I just have one thing here that maybe Ms. Sori can answer with regards why we are unable to separate Part 1 and Part 2. And I think that the explanation is more with regards how the EPPP is considered one as one now with knowledge and skills parts. Is that correct?
It's
Correct.
my understanding that it is the two-part exam and the model is based on the medical model of a knowledge-based exam, which would be administered after the coursework is completed. And then the skills-based exam is after the experience is completed so that you can assess the skills before licensure. And I don't want to speak for ASPP, but that is my understanding and how it's been presented in the past.
And I guess like ASPP can weigh in as well with regards to that. And I guess the speaker's question is with regards California then is unable to just have the Part 1 by itself as it is now once January 2026 rolls in. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm not.
That there is
Right.
that we cannot separate part 1 and part 2 in California, as suggested by the speaker.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for that clarification. So my understanding is that the statement by the Board of Directors from ASPBB is that effective January 1, 2026, the national exam will be a 2-part exam. So there will not be a part 1 and then a part 2 accepted, or only a part 1 accepted. Apologies. So right now, the case is that if you are an opt-in to the part 2 exam state, which I think there's 7 participating states right now, the exam is 2 parts. But nationally, it will be a 2-part exam starting January 1, 2026. We will not have the ability to opt out of the part 2 if we still want to utilize ASPBB as the administrator of our national exam. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that I just wanted to make sure that that is clear to the previous speaker who made a public comment, and to everyone in the call, that that if we are to use ASPPB, we'll have to use 2 parts, and the alternative is to not use ASPPB. Those are the options. Thank you, Ms. Sorick. And I just wanted to provide ASPPB an option to weigh in on the 2-part, as explained by Ms. Sorick. Any additional points before we close this matter in terms of the public comment questions?
Sure, I will add just a little, and then Dr. Song can follow. Ms. Sorick was correct. The exam, the 2-part exam, is a competency-based exam. 2 areas of competency is knowledge and skills. So I think it's important that we use the appropriate semantics with the exam, and in that 2-part process, it is competency that's inclusive of both. So that is true. January of 26, the EPPP is a competency exam with 2 parts. Dr. Song, anything to add?
Yeah, in terms of the sequence, as you said, part 1 at the completion of the training, that's the time to best measure the mastering of the knowledge. And then part 2 at the completion of internship. So yeah, that's the design.
Thank you so much. So at this point, I would like to bring it back to the committee for any additional comments, and if we have a motion as well that we will call the roll on for votes.
I have no more comments.
No more comments.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Berto, can you call the roll on the vote?
Yes. Kasuga.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harb-Sheets.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. At this point, I just wanted to have a housekeeping feeler with Mr. Fu and Dr. Harb-Sheets with regards lunch. We've passed the 12 hour, like noontime, and do we want to keep going to the next agenda, or do we want to take a lunch break? And I just wanted to acknowledge that Mr. Fu may have to step out at 1:30 if we're going to put that into consideration.
How do you have any idea, Dr. Kasuga, how much longer, how much time item 7 might take?
I would bring in Miss Sorick and the board staff for a better estimate.
Hi, this is Antoinette. I would anticipate that item 7 may take the rest of the afternoon.
Oh, so that would encourage us to take a lunch break at this point, is my thought. Mr. Fu, what do you think?
That's fine with me, absolutely. I'm going to step out from 1:30 to about 2:15, and we'll return back to the committee's business, and we'll appropriately let the committee chair as well as our solid moderators know when I return, as well as our legal counsel.
To capitalize on having Mr. Fu around, how does the committee feel about and the board staff feel about a 30-minute lunch break right now and then commencing, so we have at least an hour to discuss with Mr. Fu before he steps out?
That's fine with me.
That's fine. Thank you for making that accommodation, Dr. Kusuga, and also recognize that you and Dr. Harpsheets may need to continue without me for 45 minutes. But I really do appreciate both of you being so kind and generous with that accommodation.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on break right now, and we'll resume in 30 minutes.
And hello?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to, this is Marianne and Dr. Song. Would it be the most appropriate for us to go ahead and sign off?
Yes, thank you so much for your participation in answering our questions.
Thank you very much. And again, I'm sorry we were not aware of this call, so please forgive us if we did not.